And he had a comic that he was putting out, a comic where Irma Felna showed up. It was called Albedo. Albedo Anthropomorphics. Well, that's a $5 word, ain't it? Anthropomorphics. And there was a young, gangly hippie, lived in Southern California by the name of Mark Merlino, was part of this Galachi gang. And that's too many syllables, especially for Americans. You notice Americans don't like too many syllables. We'll shorten everything. So he was the one, and it's generally agreed, he was the one who said, that's too much to say. Why don't we just call ourselves furry fans? Because, you know, they're furry. We'll call ourselves furry fans. Okay, so furry fandom was born. And for years, it was just a phenomenon that took place at conventions, primarily in the form of room parties. They didn't even have programming for furries then. You would go to a convention, and the furries would have room parties, and you would go to the room party. And the early room parties were described to me. I need this. You would walk into the room, you walk into a room party anywhere else in the hotel, and it was something the hotel wanted to shut down because it was noisy, and there was liquor, and people were doing weird stuff. Walked in to a furry party, and the room was silent. Dead silent. It was filled with artists with black Strathmore sketchbooks, just quietly drawing. And every once in a while, one would show the sketchbook to another, and the silence would be broken with, cool. Well, it started out as artists and the fans of those artists, but more and more people started going to these furry parties. It was Mr. Merlino and his significant other started then to host parties at the conventions that they went to. And the parties were getting, not only were they getting larger and larger and a little more difficult to handle, but it started to attract some unwanted attention from people who really should have known better. The last person in the world who has any right to sneer at anybody else is the guy wearing the Yoda ears, okay? You know, to be called a loser by a guy wearing Yoda ears really hurts. By the way, is anybody in the room under the age of 18? Nuts. Heave-ho, belly, bum, drawers. I'll tell you what, is your mom, dad, or guardian in the room? Can I say something perhaps a little off-color? In historical context. I'm not just going to swear out of the blue. It's a historical context. It's okay? All right. Anybody else? I know the one.
I was at your story hour with my parents' permission, so I think it's fine.
Good. By the way, you got crappy parents. I just have to tell you. But any kid who comes up and says, "You're my role model," I'm like, I want to talk to your parents. I got to seriously talk to your parents. I think the first inkling that people were starting to poke fun at furries was some, and I see a knowing smile from a friend in the front here, people were starting to poke fun at furries is they started to vandalize the signs for the furry parties. Primarily with the word skunk fucker. Okay, it might have been funny the first time, but when it kept happening, the furries started to say, okay, this is kind of no fun. We're not coming here to be picked on, we're coming here to share art and share each other's company. So Mark and his peeps said, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to see if we can have our own convention. They were smart enough not to dive right in. It started out as essentially a house party at their house called the house itself is named. It's like its own personality. The house is called the Prancing Skiltaire. The Skiltaire being a species of like alien otter that was created by Mr. Merlino. And they called it Conference Zero because it was an experiment. Will anybody go? Well, yeah, when the walls of the house were like bursting apart from all the people who showed up, and you had to have stuff on the front lawn, and they said, okay, yeah, we can make this work. So the following year, they rented a hotel in Southern California, and they had the first conference. And it worked. And it was right around that time that this new phenomenon, I know how to say it, don't know when to stop. This new phenomenon was entering onto the scene. We used to call it time sharing. If you had a computer, you could actually connect using an electronic connection called a modem to a mainframe computer at a university or some such, and actually be on that network. And it started out with colleges, universities, starting to connect one another. I honestly don't recall at what point they started calling it the internet, but the name came about and it stuck. I can still remember visiting the first web page. It was called www.com. It was not that long ago. When you consider the sheer march of technology, it makes my head spin. Of course, there's a lot of things that make my head spin. Like that. We had in those days what we called multi-user dungeons. This is like at the tail end of the Dungeons and Dragons craze. The multi-user dungeon, the MUD. You can actually, on your computer, access a text-based adventure game where you are in a dark corridor, it extends east and west. What do? Your possible commands, E, W, or escape to quit. And more, they got more, instead of just, like binary call and response, they became more sophisticated, where you could interact with other players instead of just showing up in a room. You show up in a room. You are in a room. There is a dwarf. The dwarf has killed you. That's what happened to me every single damn time. But folks started to realize that as you could interact with other players, you could have a social interaction as well. If you didn't want to do a hack and slash adventure game, you could use this same technology to meet with people all over the world. You no longer have to go to a convention or a room party at a con. You can interact with people in real time just by typing on your keyboard. So they started creating social-based interactive programs, and they played a little bit on the multi-user dungeon, the MUD, as it was called, M-U-D, and they came up with words like muck or mush, something like that. One of them was Furry muck. Furry muck became the central hub of this burgeoning phenomenon that was slowly being known as furry fandom. If you were a furry, you met with other furries on Furry Muck. It was the go-to place. If you couldn't afford to go to Conference in California, you met with other furries on Furry Muck. And Furry Muck started to get more and more popular. There were things that happened on Furry Muck that became groundbreaking historical events, and people don't realize it. The centerpiece of Furry Month, this text-based gathering, was a park. You're in a park, and it was specifically the west corner of the park. And I noticed all the old guys just mouthed that along with me. The west corner of the park is where you hung out. It was the universal, worldwide hangout spot for furries in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in Japan, you name it. Actually, those are the only countries I can remember who were on the network at the time. Then the Germans came in and everything went to hell. But no, I made it. That's a joke. I love you guys. We're all friends now. It's okay. It's fine. Anyhow. And the French showed up. I still love them. I was in the west corner of the park. Of course, I wasn't in the west corner of the park. I was in my shabby little apartment in Hyde Park in Chicago, typing on my computer, whereas my mind was in the west corner of the park. And I was talking with friends I'd never clapped eyes on, but whom I knew better than the people who lived across the hallway. I was in the west corner of the park, and it was fairly crowded. And somebody decided they wanted to start just typing in the lyrics to a song that was very, very popular on Monty Python's Flying Circus. A bunch of Vikings singing spam, 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 spamdy spam, wonderful spam. And one person typing it in was enough, but then a bunch of other people, 30 or 40 of them, started typing there, and all you saw was spam, 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 spam. Somebody in all caps typed in, "Would you stop it with the goddamn spam?" It kind of stuck. It became our word to describe anything that basically filled your screen and just useless information piling in that had nothing to do with anything and was just annoying. And then people started to apply it to anything on the computer that came in that was just useless crap that you didn't want to deal with, like these advertisements that were starting to come in. You know, hello, I am Professor Julian Magumbo from the National University of Nigeria. I have buried $7.5 million US. And we started referring to that kind of stuff as spam. And then we noticed everybody else was too. The fact that that unsolicited commercial email, and that's what it was called unsolicited commercial email, UCE, is now universally known as spam because of that one night with 30 drunken furries on Furry Month. I was there, I saw it happen. Well, conference. Here's the thing. I actually like Mark Molino and Cy Sabin. They're fine fellows. There is something we don't really see eye to eye on, and that is how people should conduct themselves in public. Okay, these guys, look, they're hippies, they're from California. It's like, yeah, if it feels good, just do it, dude. You know? The whole idea of having a convention was just, we're here to have fun. We're here to let our hair down when we could. They really didn't invest a lot in the whole concept of decorum. Because what do we need decorum for? This is our party. And so there were some things at the convention that were a little outlandish. But it's their party, why not? But the public started to see this. And unfortunately, that was kind of the introduction of the public to furry fandom. This was the public face of furry fandom. And it gave us something of a reputation, which we are still struggling with today, some 30-odd years later. I am not going to say I blame these guys for it, because it is very, very easy to look back from much more mature, much more learned eyes and judge and say, you should have, you should have. Back then, we just didn't think about it. We didn't think it would cause a problem, but it did. Other conventions started to kind of form. One formed on the East Coast, and I'm not going to tell the whole story. And there's a gentleman chuckling up here, and he knows exactly why I'm not going to tell the whole story. I do not tell that story unless people buy me drinks. But a little tiny convention started up in association, if you would, with the Philadelphia Science Fiction Society convention, PhilCon, in Philadelphia. And it was initially called Conference East. It lasted 2-3 years? Yep. It didn't last long. It was a good effort, but the folks that were in charge of it, they just weren't ready to run a convention. And when it finally folded, there was a bunch of kids at RPI in New York, in Albany, who said, okay, apparently people like the idea of an East Coast furry convention. You don't have to travel all the way to California and shell out like $140 for a plane ticket. We used to bitch about that, yeah. $140 for Christ's sake, and I'm almost...
It was 30 years ago.
Yes. Hang on. Yes, we had airplanes then, shut up. And they were jets. These kids at RPI said, we could do that. Albany was only 4 hours away from Philadelphia. Well, it still is. I'm not saying it was. It is. I was living in Philly at the time, as if you couldn't tell from the way I talk. And I said, I shall go to this convention. It will be fun, because conference is nice, but, you know, it's getting to the point that I'm kind of afraid that somebody might take my picture there, and I'm starting to develop something of a professional reputation, and I want to kind of try to hold on to it. By the way, that didn't work. And so I went to this Albany Anthrocon, that they call it. I had been going to PhilCon and volunteering at PhilCon for years prior to that, so I had gotten a taste of the operational end of running a convention. And I have to say, it was just totally adorable, because these kids had no idea what they were doing, but they had so much heart. They didn't know what they were doing, but damn it, we're gonna do it well. And it was very, very impressive. They had something of a snafu with their art auction. Now, something you should understand, in the early days of our fandom, before there was Fur Affinity, if you wanted furry art, you had to go to a furry convention. Oh, you could download it at certain spots on the internet if you had the time. Let's click on this, and then you would watch as the cursor went. Then you went and got a burger. Then you did your laundry, watched an episode of All in the Family or something, and then went back, okay, now you're down halfway down the screen. And then you realize, well, that's not what I wanted to see. No, stop. Or worse, because you were using this modem device collected your phone line. And after 2.5 hours of you're just getting to the good parts. And then mom picks up the phone, and the whole thing goes, Mom! Hang up the damn phone! But I need to talk to your Aunt Mary. No, you don't! She's a bitch anyway! Nobody likes her! And she cut me out of the will for some reason. Aunt Mary. Let me tell you about Aunt Mary. No. Sorry, that's another, that's later. Okay, anyway. I was going somewhere with this. What was it? Oh, yes. The art show was the centerpiece of the furry convention. We were in a very, very art-intensive, just like the old days with the sketchbooks. At the room parties, people still carried those black Strathmore sketchbooks to furry conventions. And you went there for the art auction. I had seen some of the finest Fandom auctioneers in the form of Phil Folio, who was, what the hell did he do? He did that thing. Yes. Among a lot of other things. He was like one of the primary artists in Dragon magazine back in the D&D days, Phil Folio. He was an incredible auctioneer. A guy named Joe Mayhew, whose name you guys don't know, but now you do. And please keep that name alive, because he was one of the finest auctioneers, finest men, finest human beings that I knew in science fiction fandom. He's gone now. God bless him. In 1997, at Albany Anthrocon, I went to the art auction. And I'm like, oh boy, maybe there are some pieces that I will be able to bid on and purchase and put on my wall at home. And the art was there, and the staff was there, and by whatever mechanism, the auctioneer was nowhere to be found. And about 15 minutes went by, and the audience was kind of starting to fidget a little. And finally, like the assistant to the secondary lieutenant director of the art show decided he was going to try. I have not seen such profound, paralyzing stage fright in my career. I've seen people nervous to get on stage. This was literally like a phobia. I said, these kids had heart, didn't I? This guy got up there, and I was sitting about where Mr. Marmel is sitting, right here. And I could see the sweat draining off of his face. His shirt was wet from it. And he was shaking so hard the entire stage was shaking. He was hanging onto the podium because I think if he didn't, he would have passed out. And he got up there and he said, okay, the first piece is by Terry Smith, and it's called Chester Ringtail, and the bid's $75. Okay, sold $75. The next piece is by Jim Grote, and it's Red Shetland, and the bid's 80. Okay, 80. You're laughing, but it was pitiful. I wanted to cry for the poor guy. He was trying so hard, but every single piece was just the bid sheet. All right, whatever the bid is, that's what it is. The audience was kind of starting to, like, gee, what are we hanging out here for? People were starting to leave the room. After the fifth piece, I got a bad habit of sticking my nose in, by the way. That's why I'm frickin' chairman of Anthrocon. I didn't shut up at the right time. Get to that in a minute. I went up to this poor kid. By the way, when I say kid, I mean somebody under 50. If you're under 50, you're a kid. If you're under 25, you're a fetus, all right? I went up to him and I said, could I do one? He said, please. So I got up there. Now, I'd never done this before. But I had watched the best. And I thought, okay, what would Joe Mayhew do? What would Phil Folio do? So I did what they would do. And I got bids. And it worked. And this kid came up and said, do the rest, do the rest. I said, okay. That's how I became an auctioneer. Before that, it was just, I'm just a guy in a lab coat who gets drunk and tells stories in the lobby. As we got into 1998, I was approached by one of the folks from Albany Amphicon saying, would you be our guest of honor in 1998? I was like, me? I'm just a drunk in a lab coat. They said, yeah, but yes, but you're like, you know, Uncle Kage, and you tell stories, and oh, we really want you to be our guest of honor, and please, please be our guest of honor. I was flattered, like, of course, I hardly know what to say. This is an enormous honor. I'm just a guy. You guys are so great. So, well, I found out later, everybody else said no. Anyhow, they included me on their staff discussion list, I guess because if I'm guest of honor, I'm going to be doing whatever, I don't know. So they kept talking about things they wanted to do and ideas they had. And remember I said I keep sticking my nose in? I'm like, excuse me, I don't want to talk out of turn, but I need to let you know that Balticon, what you're talking about, Balticon in Baltimore, they tried that in 1989, and this horrible disaster resulted. Did you consider that? Before you can, yeah, think of that. And then something else came up, and I said, okay, that's a good idea on paper, but you're going to run into this. There's a legal issue with that. And then they started saying, well, what would you do here? How should we do this? What about this here? What's your advice on this? Well, you should do it this way, and I think you should do whatever, whatever. As we were getting close to convention time, as happens, the first year of the convention, they lost their shirts. They were like $10,000 in debt. As they were about 4 weeks out, the chairman, realizing that they were probably going to even be deeper in a hole, said, we can't do this. We're going to totally go broke. We have to cancel this. And his staff said, you can't do that. And he said, well, I can't do this. I quit. So in desperation, the staff turned to their guest of honor and said, could you take over for us? I said, well, that's going to be a little awkward, because I'm going to be your guest of honor and your chairman at the same time. By the way, this is the actual story of how it happened. I always embellish this previously, but this is how it really happened. So I did. And we made it work somehow. And afterward, I was put in a very, very good position, because I said to them all, listen, if you want this to continue, you can't run it like a bunch of kids having a fraternity party. It's not going to be sustainable. If you want this to keep going, you're going to have to run it as a business. Now, I can do that, but you're going to have to do it my way. And they said, sure, absolutely, absolutely. I said, okay, I'm in a very, very good position. You're competent. You're now a director. You're competent. You're now a director. Thank you for playing. You're a director too. I don't know who the hell you are, but damn, you're cute. You're a director. We're gonna go there. No, that's a lie. I had been there. I had seen who had talent. And I essentially railroaded them all and forced them to be board members. So that then became Anthrocon, because I wanted to move it out of Albany down to Philadelphia. Because as I said, there is no way I'm going to drive 4 hours to chair my own convention. Of course, the convention is now in Pittsburgh, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. You can do the math. But that was the beginning of Anthrocon. By this time, other conventions were starting to crop up. A bunch of folks in Europe started a little tiny, it was barely a fur meet, but they called it Eurofurrence. Its first year, it actually predated Albany Anthrocon, I think, by about 6 months. They ran it in the Netherlands, and it had maybe 16 attendees. They wanted to have it in a different European Union, which is a new thing back then. They wanted to have it in a different European Union nation every year. So this year it'll be in the Netherlands, next year in Germany, in the They went through a period of time when for about 3 years in a row it was in Germany. And of course, somebody complained, probably the French. Why is it always in the Allemande? It's supposed to be in the different European Union nation every year. So the Germans said, oh, okay, who wants it? And the room was quiet. And then way in the back of the room, a little hand from the Czech Republic went up. And the Germans said, okay, Czech Republic. And everybody else said, 9! I was on their message board thing. And I was like, I don't understand. What's the problem? And they're like, we are going to boycott the convention. We are not going to go. If you have it in the Czech Republic, we are not going to go. We are going to boycott this. I said, okay, somebody explain it to me. What's the issue? And they said, we do not want to go to the Czech Republic. And I said, you didn't have a problem in 1938. What's wrong? Too soon?
By the way, that's true.
Sorry. It shut the argument up.
Yes, I'm sure it did.
Well,
But how much incoming?
before that, the reason I was on the message board was Eurofurrence had invited me to be their guest of honor at the year before that, when it was in Germany. And I was like, oh my God, they're gonna actually make me guest of honor in another country. I found out later, everybody else said no. True. Their theme that year was the FIA. They invented this secret German government organization whose role was to oversee and keep an eye on these anthropomorphic creatures that were being seen throughout the German Republic. And they were inviting an eminent scientist and expert in the realm from the United States. I thought, oh, that's cute. Theming is great, right? It's good to have theming. Anthrocon did theming. Everybody does theming. I was like, I wonder how these kids are going to do it. You know, they can have like a little cardboard cutout of like a German secret agent or something. This would be adorable. I flew to Frankfurt, and it got kind of interesting. Everybody was still all like, you know, 9/11 and security and horrible people coming in, and you got to be safe and everything. And I got off the plane. I tend to walk very fast, you might have noticed, so I was over at the head of the crowd. And I came to the Disney line that went up to customs, and there's a guy at the desk like this. I'm like, and I walked toward him. He said, "Yeah, yeah." Okay, got out my passport. He said, yeah, willkommen. Okay, great. Security. And this seemed odd to me. I was kind of worried because shouldn't somebody like be stopping me? All right. So I continued, I walked past him, didn't even look at my passport. I walked past him, and walking through the various hallways and byways and highways and everything, I finally came to a set of double doors. I walked through the double doors, and there were three very, very large men in black suits with dark sunglasses and the curly Q things in their ears, with very official-looking government ID tags, standing there like this. I thought, oh dear. I started walking past them, and one of them got in front of me. Dr. Conway? Ja, ich bin Conway. Kommen Sie mit uns, bitte. And they flanked me. They took my luggage and they marched me through the terminal. I'm thinking, I really hope these guys are with the con. We got outside. There was a red carpet leading up to a vintage 1956 Mercedes-Benz limousine that had fender-mounted flags. The Germans love that shit. Fender-mounted flags, the German flag and the FIA departmental flag. Blacked-out SUVs, front and back, also with that emblem on the doors. One of the guys opened the back door, and I got inside. There was a box of Cuban cigars. I mean, actual Cuban cigars on the back seat. And driver got in, guard got in, the rest piled into the SUVs, and in lockstep, these three vehicles went out onto the German Autobahn. And we drove along, way out into the countryside, onto roads that looked like they hadn't been traveled in 40 or 50 years. And I was thinking, I really hope these guys are with the convention. And at one point, in the middle of the woods, we stopped. And the driver got out. And I started to reach for the handle, and the guy in the passenger seat, he said, "Nine!" They opened up the backs of the SUVs, got out blue German police light bars, put them on the SUVs, turned the sirens on, brought me into the convention site with lights and siren, pulled the limousine up to another red carpet, and I was escorted. At the end of the red carpet was the chairman of Eurofurence waiting for me, and I went up and I took his hand and I said, "Dude, you win. I can't top this. This is..." 2 years later, I had signed a contract with David L. Lawrence Convention Center in Pittsburgh. This was the first time a furry convention had gone from a hotel-based or even hostel-based thing to an actual convention center. I said, I gotta call Sven. He has the greatest name in furry fandom. His name is Sven Tegedoff. You can look it up, yes. Cheetah, his name is Sven Tegedoff. As soon as I signed that contract, I'm like, I can finally outdo him. I called him up on the old-fashioned phone. You know, crackly overseas thing. Hello? Ah, Sven! Hey, it's Kage. Listen, I gotta tell you, dude, you might want to sit down for this. I need to tell you where we're gonna have Anthrocon next year. We're gonna have my convention in a convention center. And he said, "Oh, that's nice for having ours in a castle." Fuck! This simply illustrates that furry conventions were starting to spring and were flourishing. There were first just 2 or 3. There was a, and this might be stepping on some political toes, but right now, I don't give a damn. There was a convention called DuckCon in Chicago. They had a furry track for years. A programming track that was for furries. And you get turnover in your convention organizational committee. You know, people get tired, they quit, new people come on. They happen to get some folk there en masse who thought, well, these furries, they're not really science fiction fans. They don't really belong here. We don't want these furries at our science fiction convention. So they decided they were going to, if not outright cancel, then at least seriously dissuade the furries from having their programming track. Well, the furries were sad. So they kind of hung their heads and shuffled off and said, well, maybe we can try having our own convention. So they got together and they organized this little convention. They called it Midwest Fur Fest. And it worked very nice. I was there that first year. It worked very, very well. DuckCon lost 50% of its membership that year. Take it from a convention organizer, that's not survivable. They were so frantic the next year they invited me to be their guest of honor. Even though other people said yes, because I figured, probably they thought if they invited me, maybe the furries would come back. But, well, furries had their own convention now. So it was nice to be guest of honor at DuckCon. I don't think they're still operating, are they? Funny that. Oh well. I think Midwest Fur Fest is. I think I remember reading about that.
It's a tiny little con. It's hardly. Yes.
Incidentally, people frequently ask me, oh, how do you feel now that Midwest Fur Fest is the largest furry convention? I feel relieved. And let me tell you why. For years, Anthrocon was the largest furry convention in the world. That paints a mighty big target on your back. To the extent that Anthrocon was kind of like when the world thought of furry fandom or furries, Anthrocon inevitably came up just because of its size, its prominence. So anytime anything, anywhere in the world happened where furries were involved, good or bad, and we're a community of human beings. Sometimes people do some shit. Somebody would commit a crime. Somebody would commit some heinous act. And it would be found out they were furries. And as soon as it was found out they were furries, my phone would start lighting up. And you name it. I have spoken with Fox News, with CNN, with Al Jazeera, with the BBC, with every single network news station in the United States, as well as the local news stations from wherever the hell this happened, just because, oh, it's furries. We should call the guy who runs the largest furry convention. Do you have a comment? Do you have a statement? May the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Take your leave and go, you motherfucker. I have no idea what the hell is going on. I mean, oh, wait. Do you guys hear it too, or is it just me? Good. The fuck is happening? Sorry.
It's the same frequency as your mic. We're using a wireless microphone as well.
Really? Thank you. Oh, are you talking to me? Oh, right. Fuck!
And now we
have the basis of the next Uncle Kage story.
This is where my stories come from.
We were witnesses to it.
You get to be 60, you'll understand, okay? Anyway, for years, shit would go down somewhere in the world. As soon as I heard about it, I was like, okay, now the phone calls are going to start coming in. Who's going to be today? Oh, CNN. All right, hi. Now, shit goes down, the phone rings. Hi, this is the BBC. Oh, you want to talk to the chairman of the largest furry convention? Let me give you the phone number. Yep. You want to be the largest furry convention? Go ahead, be my guest. First off, I want to state this categorically for the record. Anthrocon at no time has ever had any interest in being the largest furry convention. We've only been interested in being the best furry convention we can be. And ever since I railroaded those folks so many years ago, I still have, and I say this with absolute confidence, the finest staff that any convention organizer could ever ask for. Please do not call it Uncle Kage's convention. It's those guys that make it work in spite of my interference. Bam. So conventions popped up here and there. There are now like 80 of them, something like that. And more every time. Beware. Because there are so many furry conventions pop up and they succeed, you might get the idea that it's easy. You might get the idea that, oh, we could do this too. Remember I mentioned Albany Anthrocon? They spent that first year so deep in debt they didn't think they would ever claw their way out of it? That's where you're headed. You don't run a convention the first year and suddenly have 800 people attending. It doesn't work like that. And if it does, you will find that your budget needed 1,200 people to break even. We just started a furry convention. No, you don't. Believe me, you don't. I hear people say, I want to start a furry convention in Podunk, Iowa. Why? Because there isn't one. The very first question I ask is, okay, how many people came to your last Furmy? Well, we didn't have one. Then how the fuck do you think you're going to have people show up for a convention? Sorry, that's not... This is not Uncle Kage's "so you want to run a furry convention, no you don't" panel. This is the history of whatever the hell it is. I have an idea. We still have whatever the hell amount of time we have. I'm going to give this microphone to a man who's been around longer than me because he's old. Mr. Marmel down there is one of my oldest friends in the world. I'm going to give you this microphone, and I'm going to let you tell them whatever you want to tell them, because I've gone through half this bottle of wine, and I got to piss like a racehorse. So here we go. All right. Yeah, talk or something. I'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. Mitch Marmel, a.k.a. Major Matt Mason. You may know me as Marmel MM on for Affinity. So, the usual standby of somebody who has absolutely no idea what they're going to say next is, do we have any questions? So.
Put a stake through its heart. Kill it before it gets to the children.
Fortunately, one of my other side occupations is a ground conductor for the Arkansas and Missouri Railroad. As such, this calls for me to be able to shout, "All aboard!" over the sound of two 50-year-old diesel locomotives. So, we can dispense with this for the time being, and let's go back. We have a question over there.
When did it go from being the artist to actually the fur costume?
Well, the first costumes were actually there at the first conference, Zero and Conference 1. So this goes back to, the first costumes actually appeared in the early 1990s. So, costuming has been a portion of the fandom since day one. And it's just been a hallmark of how good and how big the fandom has become, that we've been seeing all these increasing numbers every year of all these fantastic costumes. Really excellent work, excellent craftsmanship, really nice designs. And it's just getting bigger and bigger and better. Now, you have a lot of people saying, hey, the costumes are the face of the fandom, and they are quite visible. But this does not mean that the people doing the art, people doing the writing, people doing the crafting, what have you, are not a big piece of the fandom. Okay, another question? Yes, sir.
When did you really start to see the population of the furry fandom really start to explode?
I would say it was concurrent with Albany Anthrocon becoming Anthrocon in the Philadelphia area, which was...
Fire.
What? Sorry?
They're fighting.
Oh yeah, we kept getting the mix from the the Irish music, so I had to turn that speaker off.
You're getting Irish music.
Or whatever that.
Would
you like to hear it?
Yeah, somewhere else. So I had told the speaker. Okay. So basically, the big explosion, if you will, sort of coincided with Anthrocon changing locations from Albany, which was, it's a lovely city, wonderful location, nice people and all that. But the fact of the matter is that the Philadelphia area was and is a bit more central to at least the East Coast, and it's more readily accessible. So, as soon as we changed locations, the first year we were at the Sheraton in King of Prussia?
Hilton Valley Forge.
Hilton Valley Forge. Basically the crowds at the convention, doubled? Was it something like that? Yeah. And it just kept increasing. I don't think there's been a year where Anthrocon has gotten less people every year. So it's just been getting more and more popular. And again, about, what was it, 10 years ago? We went to Pittsburgh.
15.
15 years ago, moved to Pittsburgh and been loved with by the population of Pittsburgh ever since, and just keeps growing, getting better, bigger and better. Okay, next question, please. Yes, sir.
What's your favorite and least favorite thing that's about the fandom?
My favorite what?
Speak up, we're all.
Least favorite thing that's about the fandom?
Well, my favorite thing about the fandom is, the sense of community. They have a saying at Midwest, or not Midwest, at Method Fermi, Tiger Cowboy will come out and say, "Welcome home." And that is the kind of spirit you have at a furry convention. It's like, welcome home, we are all one big family. And as for what I like least about it, having to go home afterwards. Anybody else? I can give you a couple of little notes that Kage did not go into.
You got 5 minutes.
All right. Nothing X-rated, I hope. When there's actually a very sizable connection between anime fandom and furry fandom. For example, Mark Merlino was one of the organizers of the original anime fandom organization, the CFO, Cartoon Fantasy Organization. In fact, the CFO's original mascot was the aforementioned Skillchair. In my case, I originally come from Philadelphia. So when the local CFO chapter had its monthly meetings, the furries basically came in and said, hey, let's use this little unused meeting room in the back of the facility, and we'll have our little get-togethers there. And we had our little get-togethers there, and eventually, when Anthrocon moved to the Philadelphia area, it just grew from there. Let's see, what else? Anybody, is there a question over there? No? Yes, ma'am.
What's one of your favorite cons you've been to, and how was the experience?
I'd say, Anthrocon, I spend a lot of time at, I generally go to Memphis Furry nowadays because I live in Arkansas. I moved out there almost 20 years ago. So Memphis is more of a easy drive for me. I flew down here, and frankly, I'm considering, if I come back next year, I'm really considering driving. And I did not enjoy the airline experience, to be perfectly honest. So, Memphis is about a 5-hour drive. It's relatively easy for me to get to. I do plan to get back to Anthrocon at one point. It is basically, it's where I got my start, essentially. I was the dealer's room director for the first 2 Albany Anthrocons and I think 3 or 4 of the Anthrocons when it came to the Philadelphia area. In fact, I wrote up the first set of rules for Albany Anthrocon, and they got more or less accepted, and they still exist in some form or another. And I was rather amused because I started looking at the dealer's room rules for various other furry conventions, and at least in some cases, they copied my original rules verbatim, which I thought that was kind of neat myself. Anything else you want to cover?
I'm going to expand on the rules. Oh, I don't know.
Testing, 1, 2.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Soon may the Wellerman come.
Our standards of conduct used to have restrictions on weapons.
Oh, dear.
We had a list of prohibited items, and that list of prohibited items stretched eventually to 4 pages. And it described, pistols, rifles, balisong knives was on there, sword, canes, this, that, 4 pages worth. And the year that I went down to the lobby, and there was an unnamed person named Jim Grote playing with a frickin' rocket launcher. And I stormed up to this unnamed man named Jim Grote, and I said, "To hell!" And he said, "It's not on the list."
Well,
It wasn't. Yeah, so I'm like, you're right, it's not. Neither is me strangling you with your own tongue. Anyway. By the way, I love Jim. He's like a brother to me, meaning I want to punch him all the time. The next year, the standards of conduct were significantly shorter. They said, no weapons, or anything that can reasonably be mistaken for one at a distance of 50 feet. If from 50 feet away somebody thinks you are carrying an offensive weapon, you may not bring it to Anthrocon. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. Then we put rule number 0 in. Have you ever heard the expression, a rules lawyer?
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, the rules say this, but technically,
Oh, dear God. Where's Boozy? We need him.
this predates Boozy. This is Uncle Kage's rule that basically says, and it's in red letters at the top of Anthrocon's Standards of Conduct. Any behavior or situation that could adversely affect Anthrocon's relationship with its attendees, with its venues, or the city of Pittsburgh is expressly forbidden. Meaning, don't piss me off. Because let me tell you something. I'm a scientist. Based on the mineral content and salinity of the Allegheny River, it only takes 31.5 additional pounds to sink a human body to the bottom of that river. Or so I've been told.
Very good.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yes. Okay. I can hear Boozy right now. Stop talking! Which I probably... What time does this end anyway?
Like 2 minutes ago.
Shit, crap, zip. I was reminded that this was not marked as an 18-plus panel. I offer my apologies. I blame Mr. Marmel.
Hey, Vino Veritas.
I am simply going to leave it with this. If you took offense to anything I said, I didn't mean to offend you. And I hope that you would forgive me, because that was not my intention.
Hey, Sam?
Yes.
Nothing on the schedule after you, so we can go on all night if you like.
Not up to me, it's up to them.
How much is in the bottle?
Let's just lock the door.
I did want to see at least part of the pulpit. What time's the pulpit show end? Oh, did I miss it?
5:30.
What?
5:30.
Oh, I thought you said 9:30. I'm like, oh, holy crap.
Yeah, it starts 3:30, runs till 5:30. So you got an hour left.
Here's the thing. If nothing else is in this room,
Yeah.
at 5 o'clock I'm going to the pulpit show, at least to get to the end of it. Whatever you guys do in the next half hour is up to you. I got to finish my bottle. Once again, I apologize. No, I'm not going to. Okay. If my language was offensive, I do apologize. If your children were in this room and you let them watch me, don't blame me. You know, there's an old tale that goes back to Aesop about the old man and the snake. Do you all know that one? The old man came to a river and there was a snake at the edge of the river saying, "Old man, please carry me across the river," because apparently in Greece snakes talk. And the old man said, "Dude, you're a freaking snake. I ain't carrying you across the river." And the snake said, "That's racist. You're profiling me." And the old man said, "Listen, dude, you're a snake, you're gonna bite me." And the snake said, "I'm not gonna bite you, I just want to cross the river, all right?" So the old man said, "Okay, I'll take you across the river." So the snake got carried across the river. As soon as he got on the other side, the snake bit the old man. And the old man said, "You said you weren't gonna bite me." And the snake said, "Dude, you knew what I was when you picked me up. You knew what I was when you walked in that door." Over 60. What is my wallet doing now? Why is what?
You took money.
Oh, he's gonna bribe Mitch. That's right. Never mind. Never mind. Anyhow,
He's not senile, folks, honest.
I have never seen the Nile. I have seen the Roar. It makes some damn good wine. What else from the early days? Watch this. Digital impudendum. You In the early days of our fandom, there was an unnamed person that I will not name because there is a liability. Oh, it's because of Boozy that I'm not going to play with this one. There was an individual in the early days of our fandom who decided that the way to make his fortune was twofold. One, he would approach artists, because we are a very art-oriented fandom, right? He would approach artists and say, I am putting together a collection of furry art that I'm going to sell on CDs, and I want you to be a part of it. I will pay you $400 for your art. And the artist said, okay. So the artists sent money to this individual. And these CDs were produced and were being sold. And the artists were like, oh boy, I can't wait to get my $400. And then they would check the mail, and there was a box. And they would open the box, and there would be a bunch of CDs in the box. And they'd say, oh, well that's nice. Where's my payment? And the individual, would say, well, that's your payment. There's 20 CDs there. They sell for $20 each.
Wow.
That was his business model. That was one business model. The other business model was based on the concept that once you put something on the internet, it becomes public property. He was downloading artwork from anywhere he could find it, putting it on other CDs and attempting to sell it. He also was not very judicious in who he sold to. He was downloading that kind of artwork and selling it to anybody who would look.
Boy. And his sales technique, well, let's just put it this way.
It's not safe for work.
If you passed by his table, you would see, sitting on the table top, a laptop computer. And running as a slideshow on this laptop computer would be his wares for sale. Irregardless of what the rating was or who was in the room, he just did not care.
This gentleman had the distinction of being the very first person banned from Anthrocon. Okay, in order to continue the story, I am going to give him a name. Brian Smelly.
Yeah.
That is his name, Brian Smelly. Mr. Smelly. He was banned from Anthrocon, the first person, as I said, that I sent the letter to saying, look, Mr. Smelly, this is just not working out. We've got rules here. I explained the rules to you. You didn't seem to take that to heart. I'm going to have to ask you not to come back. Mr. Smelly sent me an email back saying, I am going to contact my solicitor, and you have no right, and I'm going to sue you for restraint of trade. See you at the convention. So I contacted both my hotel and the Overflow Hotel. We had 2 hotels. That's cute, isn't it? And I said, listen, this guy's not welcome here. If he asks for a room, I don't want him here, okay? I remember coming into work one morning and finding one of those pink "while you are out" notes, on my desk. Please call this lady at the hotel. And I called her, and she was very upset. She said, "Who is this guy?" And I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "Let me tell you a story."
Oh, here we go.
Have her brace her first.
She was the lady in charge of registrations. We didn't have online registration. Then you called the hotel to make your hotel reservation in those days. You had to talk to people. The phone rang, and this lady picked it up, and she said, right away, there's something very distinctive about what was said. How do you do? I would like to inquire as to the possibility of securing a room for Anthrocon. I said, yes, sir. And your name? Smelly. Mr. B. Smelly. She looked. I'm very, very sorry, Mr. Smelly. We don't have any rooms available for you. He apparently flew into a rage, started screaming at her, and then abruptly hung up the phone. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. How do you do? I would like to inquire as to the possibility of securing a room for Anthrocon. And your name? Smith. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. We have no rooms available at all for the rest of the year. The phone went click. And then 12 hours later, in the middle of the night crew reported that a Mr. B. Smelly had called demanding to have this woman's home phone number so he could discuss the matter with her.
Okay.
And I said, now do you understand? Mm-hmm. He showed up. It was called LawnCon. He showed up and was not admitted to the hotel, so he plopped his ass down on the lawn of the hotel and would bitch about me and Anthrocon to anybody who walked by. When it was Sunday evening, closing ceremony ended at 6 p.m. that year. At 6 p.m., Mr. Smelly figured that, Conway's power is broken. So he got up from his seat in the lawn and he marched into the hotel and he sat himself down in the lobby. And word reached me that he's in the lobby. I said, oh boy. So I started walking by. The hotel manager, as I walked by, stopped me and said, Sam, don't touch him. Okay? So, excuse me. He said, oh, Dr. Conway, how are you? Just fine, sir. This is very, very awkward, but I am going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Well, you can imagine the conversation didn't stay civil. No. And he was not going to get out of the chair. The chair.
Burn the chair.
The chair. Look up, burn the chair on your own time.
Only if you're over 18.
Yes, only if you're over 18, for God's sake.
And only if you have a strong stomach.
Yes, goddamn. Anyway.
It brings chills to my spine, and I haven't seen that.
Why am I using
in 20
Don't!
technology?
I went to my old flip phone. Baby, Kirkdo Enterprise. Hello, Upper Marion Police. I'd like to speak to Sergeant Steiner, please. Oh, yes, Dave, it's Sam. Remember that guy I told you about? He's here. You know, what do I do? Oh, okay, right. He'll be right over. Sergeant Steiner showed up, and I was hiding around the corner, watching, and Mr. Smelly was in his chair, in the lobby, like this. Very defiant. Now, I couldn't hear from the distance. I could only see Sergeant Steiner walk in, and what I saw was this. And Sergeant Steiner behind him the whole way. And I could see in Mr. Steiner's eyes, give me a reason. We never had to deal with Mr. Smelly after that, which is almost a shame.
Almost.
You're right, it's not. Because he gave me a great story.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, we brought in the Doorside Irregulars, who come from science fiction fandom. They don't come from furry fandom. They are a science fiction organization. And the very first year, we were having the post-convention meeting with our brand new security staff, and we were having some booze and stuff.
They have very good whiskey, by the way.
Oh, very good. And I said, oh, hey guys, I need to tell you about this guy. You're gonna like this story. We got this guy, whose name is Brian Smelly, and they went, him! Oh, you know him. They said, we know him! I'm like, good. Tell me a story, Uncle Dorsey. So apparently his fame stretches far and wide.
Doctors on Wikipedia article on him.
Oh, Mr. S-M-E-L-L-Y, Mr. Brian Smelly. That's what I said, right?
Just like that.
That's what I said. That's
That's what you said.
I'm not mentioning any names, Boozy. I didn't say his name. Right? Burn the oh, you found it. You look very pale. Ah, he found it.
Yes,
There is not enough brain bleach in the world. Burn that out of your brain.
Any questions?
Curiosity killing the cows.
We have roughly 9-10 minutes. I do want to watch the end of the pulpit show. Has anyone any questions, any queries, anything you want to know? You have here a bubbling fountain of information vomiting forth historical knowledge for your benefit. Yes?
So what do you think about some countries accidentally creating mascots that might appeal to us? Like as of recently, we were sporting events.
Countries accidentally creating mascots that would appeal to us. Do you remember when the movie Zootopia came out and their very first advertisement introduced the word anthropomorphic?
Yep.
That's our word. Disney knew that. let me point out a little thing. Furry used to be like poison to Disney. They wanted nothing to do with furry fandom. And if you were a Disney employee, you did not bring furry into the equation. And then one year, we invited, as our guest of honor, a very quiet, modest, sweet, little old African-American gentleman named Floyd Norman. Mr. Norman is one of the last surviving animators who worked directly under Walt Disney. He is considered a Disney legend. You don't mess with Floyd if you're with Disney. You might as well mess with Roy Disney himself. Floyd went to Anthrocon, and then he went back to Disney, and all of a sudden, Disney is making movies and using the word anthropomorphic. More than coincidence? Possibly. I'm just saying.
Ironic, considering they had a mouse, a dog, and a duck who dressed up in clothing and walked upright and talked.
Exactly.
True.
Incidentally, I want to share something. As I said, Floyd is African American. He was, in the 1950s, you really didn't have a lot of black animators. As a matter of fact, I think Floyd was the only one. Floyd was very, very quiet, very soft-spoken, very gentlemanly, very polite. The only time I saw him raise his voice, and it was only slightly, was they were having a question and answer session. And somebody asked a question about the reports of Walt Disney's racism. Floyd stood up and he said, Walt Disney was not a racist. That's all I need to hear. Just wanted to share that. Other questions? Maybe. I don't know. Oh, hi. Yes.
You bring up Zootopia. Could you either confirm nor deny the rumor mill that was floating around about that time about your alleged consultation on that film?
I can neither confirm nor deny. Any alleged rumor, consultation, mills, or whatever the hell you just said. The answer is, we'll leave it in the realm of speculation and myth. I can neither confirm nor deny. I can also neither confirm nor deny anything to do with the character of Dr. Cockroach, PhD, that showed up about 10 years ago.
Coincidence.
Next question. Yeah, maybe when I'm, like, really old and senile, more than I am now, or if you buy me a drink.
And sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Exactly. Thank you. Boozy, talk to this guy. But not right now.
Boozy's here.
Hi, Boozy. Oh. Don't do that to me. Questions, comments? As I said, this is your opportunity. Oh, yes.
Why did conventions not sell DVDs of the panel?
A very, very good reason. We used to. Nobody bought them. I used to make DVDs of my story hours. About 10 years ago, I threw out about 500 of them because we couldn't frickin' give them away. Who the hell has a DVD player anymore? So, that is the honest answer to your question. We did, and nobody wanted them, so we stopped. It's called YouTube. The answer is yes, and it's called YouTube.
I'm sorry, I'm old, I don't know much.
I'm older than you are.
But you're a doctor.
And not a barber.
And you're not older than I am.
I am older than you are, dear, obviously. You're what, 40? 45?
I love you.
You're just trying to get the senior discount. You don't fool me. By the way, if you ever are stranded in an airport and you need help, look for the gate agent who is a lady about my age. And if you're wearing a hat, just go up and take off the hat and say, "Excuse me, ma'am." You'll get anything you want. A little secret for you kids out there. Questions, comments, other things? Hello. Wait. Yes, bright thing in my face. Yes, you.
So when did the term funny animal give a place to Furry?
It would have been Mark Merlino. It was funny animal based on that four-color comic from the 1950s. The whole idea of cartoon animals were funny animals. And it was after the Galachi gang showed up and Mr. Merlino created the term furry. So I can't give you a date, but somewhere in the mid to late 1980s is when the funny animal term gave way to the new, cuter, more fun term furry that we can thank Mr. Merlino for. Oh, yes, yes, sir. You had a question.
Do you think that the image, the public image of the furry fandom is changing?
The public image of furry fandom is indeed changing. It has changed. And it has changed because over time, the media has learned that the whole idea of furries are a bunch of sex fiends, not only is it not accurate, but it's old. It's old, it's tired, it's dull. And they have learned that there is so much more. There is an incredible story here to tell. There is a wealth of amazing knowledge to be shared with this fandom. And the media is waking up to that. Furries are a bunch of sex fiends. It's been done. But we've got a story to tell, and it's a hell of a story, and the media's learning that, and they're realizing that that story is a hell of a lot better than the one we've been spinning for the last couple of years. You're welcome! I worked very hard on that. Because my little old mother goes to Anthrocon, and I don't want you people embarrassing me. Or that's what I used to say until I caught that little old bat in that section of the art show. I'm like, hey, no, you out, right now. No, I want to look at the art. No, you don't get out of here. No, I look at the art. I mean, I don't, no, you're not. Get out of here. No, leave me alone. She's like, oh, right. I'm falling around. Don't look at, she's like, oh, why do they call him Gideon? I don't know, Mom, just, you need to go, and then she said, I swear, she said, why do they make the penises so small? My father passed away before I could have a talk with him. That is the God's honest truth. That actually happened. That's why I look the way I do.
It's actually 24.
What time we got?
It is time.
Oh, it is time. Thank you all. Gentlemen, thank you very much for giving the wisdom when the mind fails. Thank you all for your attention. I hope you were both educated and entertained. I'm going to the pulpit chair now.